This video explores the factors that led to the American Revolution, providing a foundational understanding of the events and intellectual movements that shaped the birth of a new nation. We will review the long and short-term causes, the environmental and economic influences on the colonists, and the key ideas of the Enlightenment and Great Awakening that inspired their pursuit of independence. Long-term origins include imperial neglect, separate development of colonial institutions, the Enlightenment's focus on natural rights, and the unifying effect of the Great Awakening. Short-term causes escalated rapidly, driven by King George III's policies, including the Proclamation of 1763, the Stamp Act, the Townshend Acts, the Boston Massacre, and the Coercive Acts. To understand the nature of the American Revolution, we examine 5 key conditions that fostered colonial identity and the eventual desire for self-governance. John Adams famously noted that the revolution was not merely the war itself, it was a radical change in the principles, opinions, and sentiments of the people that occurred beforehand. Benjamin Rush also emphasized that the American War was distinct from the American Revolution, viewing the war as only the first act of a much larger, ongoing historical drama. The 5 conditions fostering the revolution were the unique American environment, intellectual and spiritual movements, the policy of salutary neglect, economic autonomy, and the building of colonial unification efforts. The intellectual roots of this era were influenced by the scientific revolution, exemplified by Nicholas Copernicus, who challenged traditional views of the universe in 1543. Traditional geocentric models of the universe placed the Earth at the center, a worldview that had persisted for centuries. The heliocentric model, proposed by Copernicus, repositioned the Sun at the center, shifting how humanity perceived its place in the cosmos. Scientific advancements also led to a deeper understanding of the physical world, including the sheer velocity at which the Earth travels through space. Immanuel Kant defined enlightenment as humanity's emergence from self-imposed immaturity, arguing that the freedom to use reason publicly is essential for this progress. Key Enlightenment thinkers included Thomas Hobbes, who proposed the social contract, John Locke, who championed natural rights, and Montesquieu, who introduced the concept of checks and balances. The 17th and 18th centuries were marked by these influential voices, whose ideas regarding sovereignty, government contracts, and liberty would become central to American political thought. Thomas Hobbes held a pessimistic view of humanity, arguing that people were naturally violent and disorderly. He believed citizens needed an absolute ruler to maintain order. Hobbes proposed a social contract where individuals surrender some of their freedom to a king in exchange for protection and safety, comparing this relationship to a father and his children. In contrast, John Locke believed that people were inherently good and possessed natural rights. He argued that when kings abuse their power, citizens have the right to overthrow the government. John Locke's philosophy of life, liberty, and property deeply influenced Thomas Jefferson, who later adapted these ideas into the, quote, pursuit of happiness in the Declaration of Independence. The Enlightenment, or Age of Reason, emphasized these intellectual developments. Through works like the Second Treatise on Government, Locke explored the social contract and the transition from a state of nature to organized society. Beyond philosophy, the spread of ideas was aided by print culture. Despite various forms of censorship, printing became vital in the colonies as newspapers allowed people to critique the British government. By 1770, Philadelphia emerged as the printing capital of British America. Printed materials, such as Thomas Paine's Common Sense, proved crucial in turning the war into a fight for independence. During the 1730s and 1740s, the Great Awakening swept through the colonies, serving as a religious movement that countered the rationalism of the Enlightenment and encouraged a return to faith. Itinerant preachers traveled extensively, bringing their message from Massachusetts to South Carolina. These emotional revivals challenged old ideas and led to the birth of new Protestant denominations. Jonathan Edwards and George Whitefield were 2 of the movement's most famous figures. Edwards' sermons and Whitefield's powerful speaking style were instrumental in galvanizing colonial audiences. Another critical factor was the experience of self-government. English settlers brought a heritage of representative governance, from the Magna Carta to the establishment of the House of Burgesses in 1619. This self-rule thrived under salutary neglect, where Britain largely ignored the colonies. However, this changed after 1763, when Britain began imposing stricter control to pay off war debts. Economic independence was equally important. Through mercantilism and the Navigation Acts, Britain attempted to control trade, but by the 1750s, the colonies had developed a self-sufficient economy. The sudden end of salutary neglect in 1763, combined with new economic restrictions, created a breaking point that led to widespread colonial resistance. These overlapping movements, intellectual, spiritual, political, and economic, collectively forged the colonial identity that sparked the American Revolution. Following the French and Indian War, Great Britain shifted from salutary neglect to strict imperial control. Significant developments included the Albany Plan of 1754 and the Grenville Acts of 1764, which tightened trade regulations, established admiralty courts, and restricted colonial paper money. The Stamp Act of 1765 marked a critical turning point as the first direct internal tax on the colonists. Requiring revenue stamps on all printed materials, it ignited widespread constitutional protests and spurred the formation of resistance groups like the Sons of Liberty. Resistance intensified through organized networks, including committees of correspondence, economic boycotts, and formal challenges like the Virginia Resolutions, which asserted the colonists' right to be taxed only by their own elected representatives.